Yo, what's up everyone? Josh the Grinder here, and we are back at Resorts World. So as you saw yesterday, we couldn't play a session just because there's only one table going. I recognized a couple nits there, and even the poker room manager told me just to go over to the win, and then we were able to book a win at the win, flopping the nut straight and then holding, so that was really awesome. And yeah, back at Resorts World, I saw that there's two tables going and there's a waiting list, so that's a more promising sign. And can't forget the view of the hotel from the sky roof. But yeah, I think the reason I also like to come here is because I need to film some content for my poker hand recaps. So there's a nice spot to do that you guys see in my videos. Yeah, pretty much the same takeaway. I think the biggest thing is like try to not start the session out down. Like literally every session so far, I've started out down and was able to crawl out of the hole. But I would love for me to just start the session up, right? like win the first few hands and just have some positive momentum from the get-go. So I think the key here is just to not be impatient, right? Play tight, play right, play in position, make the right decisions, and yeah, just don't be too aggressive. Bet when I have it, and then don't make any crazy plays. I think last time I played at Resorts World, I lost some money barreling and missing and trying to bluff the river, or even straight up just like trying to steal the pot. So gonna try to avoid that. But let's head on in. In the first hand we're gonna cover, the under the gun opens at $15, and I look down at ace king suited on the big blind, so I go ahead and make the call. The flop comes 3-9-2 with the heart draw on board. I go ahead and check over to the pre-flop aggressor, who continuation bets for $20, and I decide to make the call with two overcards. The turn comes a five of spades, and the action goes check check. The river is another five, and when I check it over to the pre-flop aggressor, he goes ahead and bets $50, which is a sizable bet, but it feels like he's just trying to steal the pot, so I go ahead and make the call here. I get shown the bad news as he shows king five suited for river trips, and I'm essentially just dominated in this hand. He flopped a heart draw, turn second pair, and river trips. So by the time the turn came, I was basically just drawing to an ace, hoping to avoid an ace of heart. So essentially just two outs. And I should have known better and folded on the river, since this particular opponent was just running so well. He was hitting literally every hand he played and ran up his stack massively from like a $200 buy-in to at least $600. And you guys know the saying, when it rains, it pours. This guy was just absolutely running, so I should have got out of the way, perhaps on the flop. But yeah, I also could have maybe found a 3-bet and got him to fold. However, I felt like the way that this hand played out, it wouldn't have made a difference. In this next hand, I'm in under the gun and look down at ace-queen offsuit, so I opened at $15. The hijack makes the call, and so does the small blind. Flop comes 10-8 jack, rainbow, and the small blind now donk bets for $45, which is essentially a pot-sized bet. With two overs and a gut shot, I go ahead and make the call, and the hijack gets out of the way. The turn is a king of club, giving us the nut straight, so when the small blind slows down and checks over to us, we go ahead and bet. However, I think my sizing is like way too large here, since I bet $120, which is just under a pot size bet, and the small blind quickly folds, face up, showing he had ace jack, flopping top top. In this situation, I would have liked a check back or even just a downsized bet of $20 or $25, just because I feel like by betting $120, I'm basically just repping that I have a monster. And this is one of those situations where this is a better bet if I'm just bluffing and repping that I have a monster when I don't have a monster. When I actually have a monster, I should have just downsized and kept him in the hand. I feel like when I have the nuts and pretty much the hand locked up, it's best to play deceptively, since if I check back the turn, he might have fired the river depending on if he hit another jack or an ace came. So yeah, I really don't like how I played this hand, but I'm glad to take the pot down. So in this next hand, under the gun, who's a pretty solid player, but also pretty annoying to play against since he's super tight. But he's also one of those guys who's like a StarCraft nerd and probably plays a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, loves arguing with people and always thinks he's right. Anyways, I'm only bringing this up because he's going to come up in a future episode, so stay tuned for that. But he opens at $15 under the gun. I look down at pocket kings in the hijack, so I decide to play trickier against this guy. I just flat call here, and the big blind comes along as well. The flop comes 3-5-3 with the heart draw on board. The big blind checks. Under the gun bets $35. I go ahead and make the call, and so does the big blind. The turn is now a 6 of heart, and when it checks over to me, I bet $55, which is around a third of the pot, and only the big blind StarCraft nerd makes the call. The river comes a queen of spades, and the StarCraft nerd checks over to me once more, and I go ahead and bet $85 for value, and he makes the call. I show my pocket kings, and they're good. I have no idea what he had. I kind of felt like he had maybe like tens or jacks, and just didn't believe me. But honestly, this like line was extremely weird. I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys had to say in the comments down below. Did I play it properly against someone who's a solid player but like pretty nitty, or did I misplay it and probably missed out on value in case he did have like tens and jacks and I could have 3-bet him and got more money in there? So in this next hand, a crazy guy just sat down from Canada. He was 3-betting everything, 3-betting extremely wide. I think he like sucked out on a girl who had aces when he either 3 or 4-bet, and he flopped trips with like 5-4 offsuit. It was like one of those hands where he 3-bet, got lucky, and then cracked aces or kings or something. But anyways, the low jack opens at $15. Who's not the crazy guy. I look down at ace 10 suited in the cutoff, so I make the call. And then the crazy Canadian guy now 3-bets to $60. And since the low jack calls, I go ahead and call it as well. The flop comes ace 2-3 with 2 diamonds and 1 heart. So we flop top pair decent kicker with a backdoor flush draw, but the action checks around. The turn is an 8 of clubs, not really changing much. So when the low jack checks over to me, I bet $120 because I don't really think anyone else has an ace. The button now gets out of the way and the low jack makes the call. The river is a king of hearts and we both check. I show my hand and we take it down. I like how I played up until the river for this hand. I feel like on the river, this is a situation where I shouldn't have been scared of the king. Since the opponent had ace king, I was already losing anyways. And if I didn't put my opponent on an ace to begin with, then he probably could have had like a diamond draw, or like maybe he hit the king on the river. So I felt like I could have easily value bet probably like quarter pot, maybe like $80 or less, just to squeeze out a little more value. And then if my opponent raised, then I could have safely got out of the way. So one thing I'm trying to work on is betting when I don't have a nutted hand for value, since I feel like I'm only confident betting when I'm really strong. However, sometimes I bet too much. So when I'm stronger, I need to bet a little less just for like value. And then when I'm decently strong, such as in this case, but not nutted, I still need to try to get value, just because in the 1-3 streets, I feel like it's all about squeezing out value wherever you can. Okay, so in this hand, under the gun +1 opens to $15, and I look down at queen 9 suited in the cutoff, so I go ahead and make the call in late position, and the button tags along as well. The flop comes ace jack 8 with the club draw on board. The original raiser checks, so do I, and then the girl on the button, who's actually a Chinese girl from Seattle, who's a pretty solid player, she goes ahead and bets $30. This is not enough as the under the gun +1 calls, and since he called, I also decided to call just to float with my backdoor flush draw as well as gutter ball. The turn is the 10 of clubs, giving me the second nut straight, but also putting a flush out there. So when the under the gun +1 bets $65, I go ahead and just raise the $165 since he doesn't have much behind. The Chinese girl on the button gets out of the way, and the under the gun +1 goes ahead and calls for around $150 total. The river is a 6 of diamonds, and when my opponent calls, he makes a comment saying he needs some help. And I guess the help doesn't get there since the river, which is a 6 of diamonds, doesn't change anything, as I show my hand and take it down. I think my opponent here had 2-pair and he was trying to boat up. But yeah, I'm pretty happy taking this pot down, although I'm not sure if I played it properly. While I did get max value, I feel like, honestly, I just got lucky on the turn and, hit the card I needed. All right, this next hand's a bit of a weird one. I go ahead and look down at pocket fives in the low jack, and then the cutoff button and small blind also limp. So we're basically 5 ways in a limp pot going to a flop of 5-10 king with a heart draw on board. So when both blinds check over to us, we go ahead and bet $10 with bottom set, looking to build the pot. The cutoff and button both make the call, the small blind gets out of the way, and the big blind also makes the call. 4 ways to a turn of queen of hearts, which completes the flush draw. So when the big blind checks over to me, I go ahead and check, and then the cutoff bets $25. The button gets out of the way, the big blind calls, and I come along as well. Unfortunately, the boat never hits as the river's a 6 of clubs. So when the big blind checks over to me again, I also check, and then the cutoff bets $50, which is a little under half pot. With bottom set, it's one of those situations where I gotta make the call here. So that's exactly what I do. And then the cutoff shows king 5 suited for a flop 2-pair, and we're good here. I'm not sure if I played this properly. Perhaps I could have bet the turn, since had I bet, I probably would have bet a similar sizing around $25, and maybe the cutoff would have raised with his 2-pair, scared of the flush. But because I checked the river, I got $50 I wouldn't have gotten had I led, since I don't know if I would have bet that much on the river. So curious to hear what you guys think about this hand, if I could have played it any differently, but again, always glad to take down the pot, just looking to optimize in any way I can. So in this hand, there's one limper in the low jack, and I look down at king queen in the hijack, so I bump it up to $16. The cutoff, button, and low jack all make the call. Flop comes 2 queen jack with the diamond draw on board. So when the low jack checks over to me, I bet pretty large. I bet $40, which is around 2/3 pot, since this board is pretty wet. The cutoff folds, and only the button calls. The turn is now a 10 of clubs, making the board even wetter, since now if they had ace king, it's a nuts. And if they had some random like 9, they have an open-ended straight draw. This doesn't slow me down, as I bet $80, which is just under a 2/3 size pot bet, and then the button makes the call once more. The river is now a 2 of spades, which isn't a terrible card, and the pot's pretty big at this point. It's $308. The button only has around $146 left, so I just throw in 2 black chips and bet $200, and the button makes the call, showing king queen offsuit as well, so we go ahead and chop this pot up. I'm not sure if you guys would have played this one any differently. Of course, the result was a chop pot, so I think we end up profiting just because there were other players in the hand. But I'm not sure if I could have got him off the hand, and perhaps on the turn I could have slowed down. But I felt like with top pair, second best kicker, and also an open-ended straight draw on the turn, it was the right card to continue on. So in this next hand, the button opens at $15, and I look down at ace-9 suited on the small blind, so I go ahead and make the call. And then the crazy Canadian guy from earlier, he 3-bets to $80. Both the button and I make the call. The flop comes 6-8-8 with a club draw, so I go ahead and check. The crazy Canadian guy continuation bets for $200, which is a pretty big C bet. The button folds, and with 2 overcards and the nut flush draw, I go ahead and make the call. The turn comes a 3 of spades, and the action goes check check, which tells me that perhaps this guy's not that strong. And we already know his 3-betting range is extremely wide. And when the river comes in ace of diamonds, I go ahead and bet $300, which is around half pot, hoping to get paid off by pocket pairs smaller than that, such as pocket kings or queens, but the crazy Canadian guy quickly folds. In hindsight, I'm not sure if I like this river bet. I feel like it was just one of those things where I had black chips, so I wanted to throw them out. I feel like it's really easy to throw in the black chips. This is actually a pretty bad bet, since I lose to any bigger ace, which he could easily have, essentially just value owning myself. And I also deny the chance for him to bluff. Perhaps he had like a missed club draw as well. He might have tried to bluff here, and I could have bluff caught and got paid off. And also my sizing's like pretty large, like $300 into 641 is a half pot size bet. So if I'm trying to induce a weaker hand to call, they're probably not going to call such a big bet. So yeah, I'm not sure about this river bet. All right, so in this hand, I'm in the low jack, and I look down at king jack and raise it up to $15. Hijack, cutoff, button, and small blind all make the call. Going 5 ways, flop comes 2 jack queen with a diamond draw on board. The small blind now donk bets for $20. I go ahead and make the call with medium pair, and the hijack, who's the crazy Canadian guy from the previous hand, also makes the call. The turn comes a jack of spades, and the small blind now slows down and checks. I go ahead and bet $50, and then the hijack calls as well as the small blind. The river now comes an 8 of clubs, not really changing too much unless someone had like 9-10. Yeah, small blind checks. I bet $200 for value. The crazy Canadian calls and the small blind folds. I show my king jack, and it's good, as the crazy Canadian guy shows jack 7 for a lower trip jacks. This is another reason not to play jack 7, just because if you have jack 7 suited, it might be okay in like late position, I guess, but even so, it's really hard to make a straight, because if you make a straight, it's like 8, 9, 10, so you still lose to the queen jack. And then if you make a jack, like he did in this case where he had trips, you can get outkicked pretty easily. And then if you make a 7, you probably aren't good, since there's a high likelihood there's at least one overcard on the board. So yeah, I mean, really happy to scoop this big pot against the crazy Canadian guy. Okay, I was actually trying to leave at this point, since I'm already up quite a bit, but I get dealt the pocket rockets in under the gun +1, so I go ahead and limp just to be deceptive. I know you guys might roast me in the comments to say, stop limp re-raising. But yeah, hijack limps as well. Button falls for the trap as he bumps it up to $10. The big blind calls, and then I go ahead and 3-bet to $50. Only the button, who's the guy from an earlier hand, the StarCraft nerd, makes the call. The flop comes king 7-3 all clubs. I'm holding the ace of clubs, so I like this flop, but the action checks around. The turn is now a jack of spades, and I go ahead and bet $75 now, and the button makes the call. The river is a 3 of hearts, and I bet $120, just under half pot, and the button folds. Since I felt like this table was pretty friendly, I go ahead and show my hand, but in hindsight, especially after reading your guys' comments, there's no reason to show the hand unless I think I can induce someone to like make a bad play in the future. But given I was about to leave, there's no reason to show my hand here. Sometimes I just feel like when you start talking to people with like table talk, it can be harder to extract maximum value, or you feel obligated to show your hand just to be nice. But I have to remember that what happens on the poker table stays on the poker table. So even if I'm having a good time like talking to people, when I'm in a hand, I need to take it seriously and, play it properly. All right, so in the final hand I'm going to cover, this is a classic example of why you shouldn't play out of the rack. So basically, the under the gun +1 opens at $12. I look down at pocket queens in the cutoff, and I 3-bet to $40. The small blind, who's the guy from the pocket fives hand, he 4-bets to $100. The under the gun +1 original raiser gets out of the way, and I make the call here. The flop comes 2-9 jack with 2 clubs on board, and then the small blind goes all in for $239, just over a pot size bet. My overpair, I make the call. The runout comes 2 of spades, 10 of diamonds, so of course, the opponent has pocket kings, basically just extracting maximum value and doubling up on my last hand of the session, which kind of sucks just because he actually had quite a bit of chips. He had $339 to start, so that's almost one buy-in at Resorts World, and I just basically lost that instantly. I feel like when I'm running well, sometimes I feel invincible. In reality, I should have folded the 4-bet since he's only doing it with aces, kings, maybe queens or ace king at best, which is still a flip. Had I folded in this spot, then I would have saved pretty much $299. And I just felt like it was one of those situations where I was running so well this session that I felt invincible and made the bad call to the 4-bet. That's the last hand we're gonna cover in this session. Another reason why now when I rack up, I just tell the dealer to deal me out since, even if I'm going to lock up a big win, I'd rather keep it a big win versus lose on the very last hand like I did here. And if I have a small win, I'd rather just secure the win as opposed to perhaps breaking even or even losing just due to like playing out of the rack. All right, so just walked out of Resorts World. Can't even think right now. All right, so it's around like 6 a.m. Played for around 7 hours. Started off the session down like 1 to 150, and then went up $200 for my buy-in, and then went back to even or slightly down. And then the table got like crazy action around 3 or 4 a.m. This Canadian guy sat down and he was just going insane, $40 raises, 3-betting like crazy. He called a girl with like 6-7 offsuit and drilled trips on the set, and then cracked her aces. Like everything was just going insane. And then I was running good, so I was able to run my stack all the way up from around like $400 to $1,750 at its peak. And then literally right as I was racking up, I won a hand. I was like about to leave and I won a hand with aces. So then I sat down for one more orbit. Then of course I get pocket queens and then run it into kings. But fortunately I only lost like 300, 350 on that hand. So yeah, at least I didn't lose my whole stack. So yeah, really happy with how things went. Honestly, I don't think I played super well when I was dipping down, but had some run good at the end and then booked my biggest session at Resorts World. So let me get into my car to talk about the numbers. All right, the moment you all been waiting for. So I was into the game for $486 and then out of the game for $1,404 for a whopping win of $918. So this is my biggest win at Resorts World this season, or this grinder journey, and then my second biggest win all time. Had I left before the pocket queens hand, I would have been up $1,200 or $1,300, but it was honestly just a setup. You know, I 3-bet queens, got 4-bet like 2.5 times, so I called. The flop was all like low cards or, you know, all under the queen. So then I just got it in on the flop, and then the guy had pocket kings. So it was just like a setup hand. Not too upset about that, just happy that I booked a win at Resorts World, not the win, because that's 5 wins in a row. And the great news is we were able to crawl out of the hole. Like, you know, I had those 2 losing sessions, the big one at the win for around $1,500, and then the one right after that, Resorts World, for $1K. So yeah, now that I crawled out of the hole, I'm pretty much at an all-time high for this grinder journey. So I'm looking to continue that trend. I mean, I still think there's a lot of improvement for my play. I feel like even today I noticed myself making some loose calls with like 2-4 offsuit, flopping an open ender, trying to chase it and then like losing money. But I did tighten up later in the session. So yeah, super happy with how this session went. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy just because I feel like as someone who was a lifelong losing player, just to have winning sessions consistently just feels really great. And I'm super thankful for my coach Arrow. I'm actually gonna go to his house tomorrow for a barbecue and to review some hands. So yeah, that's why I'm also leaving at this time, 6 a.m. so I can get some sleep before I go to his house for hand reviews. But yeah, just super excited about this grinder journey. Honestly, I don't know how people could do this full time just because I've been playing poker every day for a little over 2 weeks, and like it's a lot, man. I feel like sitting at the table for 6 hours is way more draining than working a corporate job for the whole day. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a really great ride. You know, we're still only like a little over 2 weeks into the journey, and it's gonna be a 4-month journey. So I'm hoping I can run up my bankroll to 10K, you know, break even from the previous poker. Well, I'll need to get, you know, I'll need to make more than that, right? But those stats I show you guys is only from 2022 to 2023 live poker. I've lost a lot on online poker, but I feel like trying to beat the game, low stakes, 1-3 is the first goal. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Please like, subscribe, comment down below what you guys think of my hands. I feel like for me, this is very much just like a documentation of my journey, as well as I want to get your guys' feedback just because I'm trying to think through all my hands and just be more intentional with my play. But that's gonna do it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.